What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm going to continue my series of videos on setting up the Time Crisis games to work with the Sinden Lightgun and using the LaunchBox front end. And today we're going to talk about Time Crisis Razing Storm, which is on the PS3 using the RPCS3 emulator. So apologize right up front, this was one of the trickiest ones to get set up the way that I wanted. So I'm going to go into a lot of details on each step of the process that I found that works for me. This may not be the best way. I'm actually hopeful that someone's got a shortcut on this because there's a lot of moving parts, but it does work pretty well. If you're not familiar, my goal with setting this up, especially using the LaunchBox front end, is to enable anyone that comes over for a get-together or party or anything to be able to just pick up the game and start playing without a whole lot of difficulty. So really just pick the game out of the list, it pops up, and go from there. It's not as super easy with RPCS3, but I think I've got it pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with it. So it's going to be a long video, but I will put kind of a table of contents in the description where you can jump to different pieces if you find that you don't need to spend as much time in one area, or you really just want a tip or a hint on one area. So we're going to talk about the disk configuration, how to get it imported, the PSI configuration, which is the mouse emulation, the game configurations and settings I'm using on my machine. We'll talk about an application called Borderless Gaming, which I've used to set this up and accomplish what I've been trying to do. Talk about a lot of the problems with this game and different issues of why I've had to jump through some of these hoops. Then we'll talk about the AutoHotkey script that I've got, and we'll show how to use that to import it into LaunchBox. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing to get things started here, let's take a look at the game files. So when you rip this from your Blu-ray or get a copy of it, it's going to look like this. If you aren't familiar with the Razing Storm game, it actually is 3 games on one disc. It's Time Crisis Razing Storm, Time Crisis 4, and then a bonus game, Deadstorm Pirates. So if we go in here, you'll see under this BLUS 30528 folder, this is just the unique code for this game. You'll have these 2 folders and then this SFB file. So underneath this PS3 game folder, user dir, you'll see DSP, so this is Deadstorm Pirates, Game 1 and Game 2. Inside each one of these folders is a self file. What I'm going to do to make things easier to be able to launch each one of these games individually is I'm going to go into each one of these folders, copy the self file, and just move it up into the user dir folder. So you'll see here I've got the Pirates ps3.ppu.self, the Razing Storm self, and the Time Crisis 4 self. So you want to set that up so that you'll be able to launch these games individually from LaunchBox. Otherwise, by default, it launches this launcher.self, and it brings you a menu that has all 3 games on it, and then you pick a game from there, and then it launches that game. But to kind of make things more streamlined, if we do it this way, we can launch directly into Deadstorm, Razing Storm, or Time Crisis 4. So the next thing we're going to do here is actually launch the emulator. So go in and run this. And you'll see that I've already added the game into my game list. If you have not done this yet, just go to File, Add Games. Mine is actually in a different folder here. I put it under Dev, Hard Disk 0, Disk, and this game. So 30528, and you just select that folder, and it should figure it out and look in the directories and pull it in. So once you've got it here, you will notice that it says there's an update available. Don't do that. This update breaks the ability to launch the individual games instead of going through the launcher. So just leave it as version 1.00. Don't update it. As far as I know, there's no major bug fixes or any real positive reason to upgrade. It just breaks the ability to launch each game individually. So what I've done too is then you can set up your configuration here through the config menu. But what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a custom configuration for this game. And so I'll leave each one of these screens up. Most of the things that I'm using are defaults, but there are some settings that I've changed that seem to work for me and seem to have really made a performance boost, at least on my system. So I think these are all defaults. The recompiler, LLVM, I think these are defaults as well. But I know this, I have changed this from auto to 1, the preferred SPU threads. So if you hover your mouse, actually you get a nice bit of information on it. So you want it to be as small as possible, but then that can sometimes cause issues. So I've just set it to 1, and it seemed to work perfectly. I haven't seen any issues, and in fact, the performance is actually increased by setting this down to 1. Under GPU, I'm using, you can see here, this AMD graphics card with a Vulkan render. For Razing Storm and Time Crisis 4, I've set a frame limit of 30. This has really helped with stuttering of audio, and the game runs perfectly fine, runs really fast, looks awesome. For Deadstorm Pirates, this is set to auto. And I'll show you how to set the configs per game, because right now, even though this has got 3 games in it, RPCS3 treats this as 1 disk. So these configurations are going to apply to all of the games in this disk, but I'll show you how to override that here later on when we get to the AutoHotkey scripts. Using the recommended resolution, leaving this as 100% resolution. If you've got a really powerful graphics card or PC, you can bump these up to your heart's content to increase the performance. I believe all these are default. The one thing for Time Crisis 4 and Deadstorm Pirates, it's absolutely essential to have right color buffers enabled. For Razing Storm, you do not need this. Audio, I haven't changed a thing. I/O, this is where things get really important, to set them exactly as I have here. So what this is going to do is this is going to emulate the PSI, which is a system that came with a PS3, or you could use it with the PS3, where it was these color balls on the end of controllers and a camera would track them. So this is emulating that. So set this to PSI. The move handler is going to be a mouse. Camera is fake. And then your keyboard and mouse handler are null. So make sure you've got those set that way. Under system, everything's the same. Network, disconnected, not using any PlayStation network or anything like that. Under advanced, have not changed a thing. All the defaults here. And then under emulator, what you want to make sure, as I know it's checked here, but you don't want this. The start games in full screen mode, you absolutely want that off. These other things I've got set up, that's completely fine. The other thing is this game window title. This is default. You can change this, but it will impact a step later that I'll show you of how we're detecting the game window. So I've left it as default, where it's going to show the frames per second and then some other information about the game. So you could go ahead and run this game right now as is, but you're going to run into a couple issues. The first being that full screen issue. Remember that I deselected enable full screen mode, and that's critical for calibrating the PS Move with the mouse. If you launch in full screen and then try to calibrate, it's just not going to line up. There's something going on where even after you calibrate it, your mouse or the Sinden Lightgun just does not match up with where it's hitting in the game. So you have to use windowed mode. The second is the controls for the PS Move emulation use a combination of mouse clicks to send the triangle button, for example. You have to hit 3 different buttons at the same time to get it to interpret that as you press the triangle key, regardless of if you've mapped different buttons on your keyboard or a gamepad. Those are 2 major issues that we will solve. And so let's talk about the first one, which is the full screen. So I found this application called Borderless Gaming. Last update was in July of 2019, but it works. Apparently this was around a lot for Steam games. I've just been exposed to it, but it works great for this. So you go ahead and download the EXE. Windows is probably going to yell at you about virus protection or something with the EXE because it doesn't like downloading those directly, but it works fine. You install it, and then you can actually set it to run in the background or on startup. And you'll see it down here in the system tray, this game, Borderless Gaming. So we're going to go ahead and open this. And what you'll see is this has got a list of applications that are currently open. And it's got, it looks like tracking some of the history. And then you can add games to your favorites or different windows, whatever it is. What I've done here, and this is where I talked about the window title configuration in RPCS3, is I'm using that to detect the window. So the issue I was having initially was that window was going to show the frames per second, and that was constantly going to jump around and change, so the window title would change. So what I've done here is if you click on one of these applications on the left-hand side, right-click, you can add to favorites, but I'm going to use by the window title text with a regex. And my regex, I'm not going to type it in here, but you can take a look at it, is just FPS dot star in brackets, BLUS 30528, close brackets, dot star. So this is going to match FPS, any string of characters, then it's going to look for the game disk ID, and then any characters after that. And if it matches any windows that have that title, it's going to trigger automatically the settings that I've got configured here. And so that's where, back here on RPCS3, where I showed you that window title, see FPS, and then in brackets here is going to be the disk serial number. So I know to match on that. The other thing here that I've found, I'll go ahead and remove this. The other thing that I've found is that if you leave this on auto maximize, which is the default, it really has the exact same problem as if you open in full screen in RPCS3. You'll be able to calibrate your gun, but it's just going to go haywire. So what I've done is set this to full screen, but I've disabled auto maximize, and I've adjusted the window bounds. And what you'll see here is you can adjust how big it makes the screen. And so the pixel adjustment for the left window edge is 0. It's going to put the left side directly on the left side of the screen. But on the right edge, I've set it to -1. So what this does is it actually is going to expand the window as big as it can get, because you'll see on the top and bottom I've left it at 0. But it's going to leave 1 pixel down the right hand side. And to Windows, that treats it then as not full screen. And the gun tracking and calibration works perfectly. Gone ahead and set that up. That solved that problem. It works beautifully as long as Borderless Gaming is running in the background, which it does, and I have it set up to start on application startup. And I'll show you that here if I just open it. Options, run on startup. So that's going to grab the window and take care of the full screen issue. Now there's another issue I'll talk about here in just a second, but that will at least allow the game to run almost full screen without having the issue of calibration, and the gun or the mouse will track perfectly to the game. So now let's talk about our AutoHotkey script to launch all of this. This is going to look really similar if you've seen my Time Crisis 5 video. A lot of this is the same type of logic that has been used to launch the light gun application, to launch the biped application that is the infinity pedal to open and close things. What we've got here is just the boilerplate along with this single instance force. That means we're only going to have one of these running. If the light gun exe is already running, I'm going to kill it, and then I'm going to start it again with the auto border argument. So it's going to start the light gun application and draw the 16:9 border around the window. The next line here is I'm going to launch RPCS3. I'm going to pass in the self file for the game. So I'm going to tell it run RPCS3, start this game, and then I'm going to tell it to use this config. So this config argument then points to a custom config that I have set up for Time Crisis 4. And if we take a look at that, it's a YAML file. And I think I mentioned when I was going through the configurations, all of these games use pretty much the exact same configuration with a couple of different modifications. So for example, Time Crisis 4 and Razing Storm, because I'm matching on case here, you'll see I've got my frame limit set to 30, and I've got my right color buffers set to true. If I open up Time Crisis Razing Storm, you see I've got right color buffers set to false for that one. And then for Deadstorm Pirates, my frame limit is auto instead of 30, and my right color buffers is set to true. So these are the settings for each individual game, and then I pass those in here. So in this case, this is Time Crisis 4. I'm passing in this config, tc4.yaml, and then for Time Crisis Razing Storm, tcrs, and then for Deadstorm Pirates _DSP. So this is all stuff that I named. It's not going to be named like this by default. What you'll find is the best way to set this up is in here, edit your custom configuration, close it, and then in your RPCS3 folder, under config, custom configs, you'll have this one. This is just for the whole disk. I've just copied it and created one for Deadstorm Pirates, Time Crisis 4, Time Crisis Razing Storm, and then gone into the YAML file and adjusted the things that I need. So I've set up the base configuration and then just tweaked for each one. I've got some logic here that is running the Nomousy application. So what I've got is I've got a button on my light gun, actually the number 1 button, that will toggle the cursor on and off. I start off with it disabled, so cursor visible is equal to false, and then I run Nomousy exe with the /hide argument to turn the mouse cursor off. And then down here, if I push the 1 button, if it's on, disable it. Else, if it's off, set it to true, and then turn the cursor back on. So it can just toggle the cursor on and off. This section here is pretty interesting. So I mentioned that with the Borderless Gaming, we're actually taking 1 pixel off the right-hand side to trick it into being full screen, but not actually full screen. The issue is then, if you take your mouse all the way to the right-hand side of the screen into that 1 pixel and click, which can happen all the time if you're playing rapidly with the light gun, right? You might be pointing off the screen to the right and pull the trigger, which is either right-clicking or left-clicking in that one pixel. You'll actually be selecting whatever window is behind the game. So this can really wreak some havoc if you're in the middle of gaming, then all of a sudden you click outside of the window. So the window is going to take up every pixel on the screen except the one pixel down the right-hand side. So this logic here is actually going to, on every mouse click, if the cursor is actually, and it could be 1, but I've just made it 3 to be safe. If it's in the 3 pixels on the right-hand side of the screen, just return and do nothing. So 3 pixels is just such a tiny amount that there's never going to be an enemy there or anything really that you need to click exactly in those 3 pixels. But this resolves the issue of clicking outside of the window. And so this trick here could be used in any script if you want to lock down mouse clicks to only a certain area of the screen. So this was a pretty cool find. I did not write this myself. I found it on a forum post somewhere. But so this is just going to swallow any mouse clicks in that area so that the game window always remains active. So that solves the full screen issue. The next issue I mentioned was the button combinations. So the biggest issue with this is after the calibration, the only way to accept the calibration is to hit the triangle button on the controller. And while you're in the calibration procedure, it only accepts input from whatever that motion controller is, in this case the mouse. So you can't map the triangle button to something else on a gamepad or a keyboard. It has to come from the input device that's being calibrated, so the mouse. Now if you're using a mouse, the triangle button is actually mapped to hitting all 3 mouse keys at the same time. So right, left, and middle. However, it gets finicky and doesn't always work. So actually on another YouTube video, I found a tip about how to actually send that in with a mouse, and then I've just scripted that here on this AutoHotkey script. And so what we're doing is I've mapped the space bar, which is a button on the light gun, to press down the right mouse button, wait 60 seconds, press down the middle mouse button, wait 60 milliseconds, sorry, I think I said seconds, and then press the left button down for 20 milliseconds, and then lift the left button up, wait for 60 milliseconds, and then release the middle mouse and right mouse button. So what this effectively does is mimics a user clicking the right mouse button and holding it, clicking the middle mouse button and holding it, and then just clicking the left mouse button and then releasing everything else. So on that left mouse button click, it actually sends the triangle press, and it's been working excellent, this logic here. Actually, I've got an updated script on the GitHub that I'll link. I'm no longer doing it on spacebar up, I'm just doing it on spacebar. So you can see that update. I was playing around and trying some different things, but it works fine. So it's just looks like that in the script that'll be out there on the GitHub. And then with the circle button, kind of the similar thing. The circle button is left mouse button and right mouse button. So I've got that bound to actually the middle mouse button, which is a key on the Sinden Lightgun. If I tap the button that corresponds to that, it's going to hold down the left button and then click the right button and then release the left button. So this will send to the emulator the PlayStation circle button. Everything else can be managed with just the right click, which is the pump on the gun, or a mouse click, which is obviously pulling the trigger at the screen. Finally, I press the escape key at any time, I'm going to close the light gun application, I'm going to close the biped application, I'm going to close RPCS3, run this script to turn the mouse back on if it was disabled, wait 1 second and then kill Nomousy, because I found it does like to just sit and run in the background. It doesn't do anything, but I like to clean everything up. So I kill it here and then exit the AutoHotkey script. One of the things I will jump back to is the right mouse click is actually the button that ducks behind a cover or pops out to actually start shooting at the enemies. So you'll see that in my biped application, which controls the infinity pedal, I've just bound every pedal to the right mouse button, which is 3000. So no matter what pedal I use, and I always use the middle one on the infinity pedal, no matter which one I press, if my foot slips or something, it's always going to action that right mouse click, which is going to be the duck behind cover or pop out. So I wanted to mention. Okay, so now that we've got through all of that, let's go ahead, and someone left a comment about adding this to LaunchBox. So I'll show you here how I do that with an AutoHotkey script. So you see I've got my Time Crisis games here. One of these is for MAME, one of them's for PS1. Then I've got Time Crisis 2, which is the exact same thing. One of these is the MAME version of the game, and the other is the PS2 version. But you'll see that I don't have Time Crisis Razing Storm in here. I do have Time Crisis 4, but I don't have Time Crisis Razing Storm. So I've got 3 separate scripts, and they're all identical besides which .self file that I pass to RPCS3 as well as the config file. But so I've got Razing Storm, Time Crisis 4, and Deadstorm Pirates. So I can just go ahead and grab this AutoHotkey script and drop it into my LaunchBox, and I'll get this window. So what type of file? I'm going to pick ROM files. The platform is going to be PlayStation 3. So it's going to make me choose an emulator. So I'm just going to go ahead, and you don't need Rocket Launcher. Just pick an emulator that you have in your list. It does not matter which one you pick. I'm just going to pick Rocket Launcher for this case. Go ahead and click Next. I'm happy with where these HK files are. I'm not going to copy them. Somebody used them in their current location. And then, yes, I want to search for information. Just give me everything you can find. I've got Emu movies integrated here. Give me everything you can find from that. Nothing selected here. Just going to leave these all blank. Go ahead and click Next, and you'll see that Time Crisis Razing Storm .hk, and click Finish. I believe it's based on the name of this file, so if you named this something crazy, it probably wouldn't find it. But it went ahead and found the game and imported it successfully. And what you'll see here is it got the image. If I go ahead and open this and edit this and look at images, it grabbed the clear logo, different types of images for the box images. So it picked all that up automatically by dropping in the AutoHotkey file. Now the one thing you'll do here is, remember we picked Rocket Launcher. We don't want to use that. We want to use just the AutoHotkey script. So go ahead and go under Emulation and just uncheck that box. And click OK. And now we've got Razing Storm in here. So let me go ahead and run this. If I double click, you'll see it opens RPCS3. Border pops up. It's going to load this SPU cache. RPCS3 does have a no GUI option, which I wish worked, but it looks like it doesn't do this cache piece, and the game runs terribly. So the no GUI option doesn't work now. I don't know if you noticed that it started up in a window and then just popped open and expanded. That was Borderless Gaming recognizing the title of the window and then grabbing it and expanding it to full screen, or at least full screen with 1 pixel down the right hand side. But you see that 1 pixel is covered up by the Sinden border, so you don't even notice it. It's perfect. So go ahead and begin this calibration. push the button for the triangle. And there we go. We're in the game. Then to navigate through menus, you just pull the pump on the gun, which is the right mouse button. Would you like to sign in? Doesn't matter, we're not connected. Just pull the pump, and then there we are. We've got Razing Storm playing right now. And again, to navigate through these menus, accept options, you can pull the pump, and it works good. And then you can use the D-pad on the gun to navigate through the different menus, and then pull the pump action. So I'm going to push the escape key. I want to show you something in Time Crisis 4 if I launch that. And so we get the calibration screen again. Press the button on the gun for the triangle.
Time Crisis 4.
So now we're in the game here. Pull the pump. So Razing Storm and Deadstorm Pirates default to using the motion controller. For some reason, Time Crisis 4 does not. So the very first time you play it, and only the first time, if you go into a one-player free play, just make sure under controller, you've picked motion controller number 7. I think by default it goes to a gamepad, and you'll be wondering why your light gun doesn't work. That's why. Just make sure controller number 1 is set to motion controller number 7, and then this persists, and it'll save this for any future run of the game. Couple things. I don't know of any way to bypass that calibration. On some of the other games, you can create a save state after you've performed it, and then just open that, and I'll show that when I release my PS2 video. But for PS3, it does not support currently on the emulator to create save states. So every time you open it, you're going to have to go through that calibration. And I will show you a trick here. Let me go ahead and launch it again. And I'll turn the mouse on so you can see. When you go to calibrate, you actually want to shoot slightly outside of the targets. So I'll come back in here into the calibration window. I'll go ahead and turn the mouse cursor on so you can see it. So I actually point slightly above, below, left, right, and then dead center. And then it tracks the mouse cursor pretty closely. Certainly good enough to play reliably. So that's one trick with that.
Time Crisis 4.
So that's pretty much it for the video. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. If you have an easier way or different thoughts for setting this up, I am definitely looking for suggestions, ways to improve this, and go from there. But right now, this process, even though it's convoluted, it's really reliable and does result in exactly what I was looking for, where someone could just pick the game out of a list. It starts up with a border, everything's turned on, all the extra software is enabled, it's full screen, and you can just go ahead and pick up and play. So I hope you liked it. If you found it useful, leave a like, perhaps subscribe for more videos that are coming on how to set up these different emulators in different games, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.